Hello and welcome back. In this original Black Excellence presentation, we will highlight the 6888, the incredible Black women soldiers who served in World War II.
Welcome to blackexcellence.com, the site where we share Black excellence, opulence, and affluence. Our mission is to inspire you as we enlighten you.
All Black female battalion, they understood the significance of their presence and displayed exemplary character under pressure. In this original Black Excellence presentation, we present to you the 6888. So without further ado, let's get started. The U.S. military was receiving growing pressure from politicians and African American organizations to include Black women in what was called the Women's Army Corps, allowing them to serve overseas. The U.S. forces, bending to this public pressure, then made plans to deploy a large unit of Black women into service, but they couldn't quite determine when or what would be their purpose. And it wouldn't be until 1944 that the concept would be seriously floated again. More than a year after the Women's Army Corps was formed and officially absorbed by the active duty army, the Germans had begun a concentrated counteroffensive on the Western Front in Europe, known as the Battle of the Bulge. The fighting raged for 5 weeks and took a heavy toll on American forces. Some 19,000 GIs were killed, and many tens of thousands were wounded, captured, or missing in action. Surrounded by death, soldiers in the trenches were desperate to receive word, letters, and packages from loved ones back home, while at the same time, the chaos of the battle strained the Army's ability to deliver it. The War Department seized the opportunity to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, get the soldiers their mail, and grant Black women fuller participation in the war. So the 6888th Central Postal Directory Battalion was formed, and they would be affectionately nicknamed the 6888. Major Charity Adams commanded the battalion. She joined the predecessor to the Women's Army Corps, the Women's Army Auxiliary Corps, in 1942, and became the first African American woman to receive an Army commission. In the summer of 1944, Adams and other Black servicewomen at Fort Des Moines had received orders to start training. At the training center, Adams oversaw 4 companies whose preparation was very extensive and intense. This included gas mask drills, obstacle courses, classroom training, clothes packing exercises, physical examinations, and close order drill. The women performed well despite the ever-present specter of racism and felt that they were prepared to serve the country in any way possible. By December 1944, the women were fully trained and going home to visit with family as they awaited their orders, hoping that they would have the opportunity to prove their value and patriotism. It was at this time that Major Adams received orders from England to prepare her troops to sail overseas to join the United States Army operations in Europe for World War II. On February 14th, the 6888 arrived at their new home at the King Edward School near downtown Birmingham, England. They were divided up into 4 postal directory companies, and duties were divided up accordingly. Work conditions were less than ideal, and the women were initially overwhelmed and discouraged. The warehouses were damp, without heat, and poorly lit since all of the windows were blacked out for security. To battle the cold, some women resorted to wearing ski pants, field jackets, fatigues, or anything else to keep warm. They soon discovered that the warehouses were crammed from floor to ceiling with mail and packages that had not been delivered for at least 2 years. Rats and rodents had overrun the warehouses and had eaten their way into the care packages sent by family members for frontline soldiers. But the Black servicewomen would not be dismayed for long. They went to work. They started organizing a system that would break the bottleneck of undelivered mail. The initial shock of the workload eventually gave way to collective determination. Before long, the 6888 was operating the fastest and most reliable mail directory in the European theater. They adopted the motto, "No mail, low morale," which echoed the commitment of these servicewomen to do their best and go above to ensure the soldiers received the desperately needed warm welcome and packages from their loved ones. The 6888 worked diligently around the clock, 7 days a week, in rotating 8-hour shifts. Each shift sorted and processed approximately 65,000 pieces of mail bound for troops scattered across the entire European continent. The servicewomen of the 6,888th Battalion set up their own Army postal office system and tweaked the process to perfection. Carts were incorporated to organize and pitch mail. Once the carts were full, the mail would be delivered to the APOs for further distribution. Some of the letters and packages had only partial addresses. Others were often labeled without key identifying information, making it exceedingly difficult to locate the intended recipients. One of the biggest challenges was the fact that some packages were intended for different individuals who had the same name. Who would imagine that there would be 7,500 Robert Smiths serving in World War II? Nonetheless, the unit created and maintained a system of roughly 7 million special locator cards to track service members and use serial numbers to distinguish the soldiers who had the same name. When a piece of mail was only partially addressed, they researched to try to find the soldier it was meant for. The 6888 also repackaged damaged goods and ensured that they were sent out expeditiously to the proper soldiers as well. Army leadership estimated that it would take at least 6 months and closer to a year to get the mail backlog taken care of. The 6888 completed it in only 3. The 6888 was a self-sufficient unit. The Army wasn't yet integrated for men, let alone women. They had their own medics, dining hall, motor pools, supply rooms, and support services. The 6,888th Battalion even had its own chapel, public affairs officer, newsletter, and military police who were not armed but were trained in jiu-jitsu. It hosted sports teams and even put on dances at Army hospitals around England. In fact, all the positions of an Army battalion, including communications, record-keeping, and recreation, were all staffed by Black women. As with any minority unit in a segregated army, the 6,888th experienced its share of sexism and racism. But with Major Adams in charge, they had no tolerance for racial discrimination and segregation. Adams often stood up for her battalion. She clashed occasionally with generals and superiors who sought to impose segregation on her unit, or those who questioned and criticized the presence of Black women in the military. She once clashed with the Red Cross after it prepared a segregated hotel specially for 6888 members on leave in London. Apparently worried about Black servicewomen socializing with white soldiers and white civilians in the city, the organization suggested to Major Adams that, quote-unquote, colored girls would be happier if they had a hotel all to themselves. At the encouragement of Adams, nobody from the unit ever stayed there. Instead, she coordinated with Black troops stationed in London to ensure her soldiers stayed only in integrated hotels. The outcome was a small but profound victory for Major Adams. When some African American male soldiers thought the women came to Europe to provide them companionship, the ladies quickly set them straight. When the Red Cross opened a club for Black women only, Major Adams asked her soldiers to show solidarity and resist entering the club. Several members of the unit's basketball team were invited to play on an Army All-Star team, but when the Army realized the players were Black, the invitation was rescinded. The battalion's team responded by going on to win the European Theater Operations Basketball Championship of 1945. A visiting general, not in her chain of command, wanted to see her soldiers march. It seemed like every weekend her troops were marching for one general or another. On this one occasion, when the general arrived, there were only 300 of Adams' women ready for inspection. The general wanted to know where the rest of the women were. Major Adams explained that 1/3 were on duty and the other third were resting. The general did not find that answer satisfactory. "I tell you what I'm going to do, Major Adams. I'm going to send a white first lieutenant down here to show you how to run things." Adams was well aware that her officers and soldiers in formation had heard the exchange. In defense of her troops and to maintain the respect necessary to effectively lead them, Major Adams quickly retorted, "Over my dead body, sir." In May 1945, following Germany's surrender and the war effectively ending, the 6888 was sent to Rouen, France, where they were charged to clear another postal logjam while non-combat military operations continued in the aftermath of the war. The women stepped onto the docks to discover mountains of rubble that used to be a port town. The greeting in France on that 20th day of May was much better, as male African American soldiers were on hand to greet, welcome, and assist their fellow lady soldiers. Small unions united the women and men, some who were family and friends, and others simply bonded by the common cause to join the military and defend their country. In France, the sights and surroundings may have changed, but the work was the same. The 6888 was no stranger to the sight of mail backed up for 2 to 3 years, stacked chest high. Again, the battalion was ordered to deliver the mail in 6 months. Again, they did it in 3. After 5 months in Rouen, the battalion transferred to Paris. The women were housed in 2 lavish hotels, and for the first time in their military service, and for some the first time ever, the women were treated to maid service and meals prepared by the hotel's cooks. While living conditions improved, their work became more difficult as more and more service battalion was disbanded on March 9, 1946 at Camp Kilmer, New Jersey. The 6888 performed its job honorably and performed its job extremely well. Despite the enormous sacrifices made by black soldiers overseas, the military wasn't officially desegregated until 1948. It would take another 2 decades for the country as a whole to follow suit. 75 years later, and after most of them have passed away, the 6888 have started to receive formal recognition for its contributions during World War II. In 2016, the U.S. Army Women's Foundation honored the battalion by introducing it into the Foundation's Hall of Fame. In 2018, a monument was dedicated in their honor at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. On February 20, 2019, the Secretary of the Army awarded them with the Meritorious Unit Commendation for meritorious service. On April 4, 2019, the 6888 documentary premiered at the Women in Military Service to America and screened throughout the United States, earning several Best Documentary Feature awards. For the women of the 6,888th Central Postal Directory Battalion, World War II was truly a war of liberation. They served their country in trying conditions, accomplished their mission, and showed what African American women could do if given the chance. In 2021, the U.S. Senate unanimously passed legislation to award the Congressional Gold Medal, the nation's highest civilian award, to the members of the Women's Army Corps who were assigned to the 6,688th Central Postal Directory Battalion, the 6888, during World War II. As for Major Charity Adams, she left military service in 1946 as a lieutenant colonel, the highest-ranking black female in the U.S. Army at that time. She would go on to a distinguished career as an educator and administrator. She was selected for the Ohio Women's Hall of Fame and the Smithsonian Institution 100 Most Important Black Women in History, among other honors and awards. Adams received honorary doctorates from Wilberforce University and the University of Dayton. She passed away on January 13, 2002. We salute Major Adams and her troops of the 6888. We honor you for your valor, your contributions, and your spirit to overcome any challenge placed before you.
We appreciate the fact that you stayed with us until the end. Thank you for spending time with us, and don't forget to like this video. Also, make sure you subscribe so that you never miss a video. Bye for now. We will see you tomorrow.